It's been almost 25 years and the PlayStation 1 has been a historical console. It was heavily focused on third-party developers and using CDs instead of cartridges, and they outsold Nintendo, who backstabbed them originally. But of course, in the decade of nostalgia, everyone has been trying to relive these moments, and Sony has as well. But for some reason, their classic console didn't do well. Obviously, because this timeline lasts 3 years, there's not much history at all. So this is more going to be talking about why it failed and less about the history. It all started back on November 10th of 2016. Nintendo released the NES Classic. Within only a few seconds to a few minutes, it sold out. The limited supply of these consoles really made people interested in buying this. Factor that with some fans wanting the nostalgia of the console. Because of these combinations, Nintendo hit a jackpot. Everyone was trying to buy one, and it was a hot item for the holidays. Every time they would refresh the stores, they would sell out almost automatically. Eventually, Nintendo took a hiatus from selling them. In the meantime of that year of 2017, they released the SNES Classic, which also was successful. And the year after that, the NES Classic would return in June of 2018. And they sold more NES Classics than PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch for gaming hardware that month. Meanwhile, companies were watching all of this and wanted to jump onto the classic/mini frenzy. Sony, of course, was one of these people. They would soon announce the PS Classic in September. It ran on PCSX rearmed OS, and it had over 20 games. But then skeptics began to rise slowly. The first one came about the Classic running some games at 50 Hz. What does that mean? Well, actually nothing if you live in most countries and regions where PAL is the format, but in America, most TVs run at 60 Hz or 60 FPS. Another issue that rose is that the Classic didn't have an AC adapter. Now yes, this AC adapter is something that everyone has if they have a smartphone, but to some it's more about the convenience. So the Classic launched on December 3rd of 2018, and sales were relatively slow. Only a few weeks later, its $100 price tag was being cut to $60. 2 months later, it was dropped to $40, and a few months after that, it dropped to $30. And as of now, it has dropped all the way down to $25. Now in 6 months, dropping your price 75% down is really bad. And that's not just from a consumer's perspective, but from people that would be in a business industry looking at that, that is really bad. For Business 101, that means that there's more supply than demand. A lot. They had a discount for $25. But here's the weird part. If the original PS1 sold better than the NES or the SNES, why did the Classic sell horribly? Why wasn't the fan base buying it like they were for the NES and SNES Classic? Well, I found many explanations, and at the end, I will say the biggest reason why. So to start off, because of the hertz difference, there were a few games that were not actually working properly. There would either be frame issues or sound issues. Now to some people, this wouldn't actually be a bother, but there is a group of people that would be bothered by this, because everyone has their own preferences. Some people have said that it's the price at first, but if that was the case, then it would be selling well right now. And the SNES Classic was selling just fine at $80, and that's just a $20 difference. In my personal opinion though, I feel like Sony may have been too late. When you look at the search terms on Google Trends, it shows that people weren't searching for classic consoles as much as they were in 2016 and 2017, when the NES Classic came out, and then the next year the SNES Classic came out. But we're not exactly sure if that's true yet. Sega is about to release their Genesis Classic, and we'll find out if that's true or not according to their sales. It should be noted that only a few months before the PS1 Classic was released, the NES Classic was the top-selling hardware for June. And here's most likely the biggest reason, and this is coming from the fans. Of course it has memorable games and a great library. When you read the comments for the full library trailer, a lot of people seem to want Crash and Silent Hill and some other games that really defined what the PS1 was. And I think that's also another big factor that played into this. Sony wasn't able to get the license in time for the games that people wanted, which could indicate that they were trying to rush to get the system out there for the holidays. This also would explain why the NES and the SNES Classic were so successful. Most of the games on there are owned by Nintendo, with some exceptions. This is something that Nintendo has an advantage on when having so many popular first-party games. Nintendo also could have had more time to get rights to popular titles. As seen on the SNES Classic, there's a lot of great third-party games on there. A big incentive was Star Fox 2, which never released. And for Sony not to have Silent Hill, Crash Bandicoot, Tomb Raider, Gran Turismo, and many others, it doesn't feel as worth it even if you have other big titles on there. Because remember that Sony's selling this to people who grew up with the PS1, and those few games are missing can be a big defining factor when deciding whether to buy it or not. Those are at least the things that I've noticed and I've seen other people notice that went wrong. But what do you think went wrong? Were you one of the people that considered buying one but backed out? Or maybe you own one. Is it really as bad as people say? And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.